Okay, so in this video, we'll be talking about international financial institutions. So for the Philippines, our country normally deals with World Bank, International Monetary Fund, and then there's Asian Development Bank. So what do these international financial institutions actually do? Okay, so we have here a page from United Nations. They have development programs for member nations, and then they do what do you call this they are somehow affiliated with different international financial institutions to cater to the needs of their member nations. Okay, so UNDP and international financial institutions. International financial institutions including multilateral, regional, and national development banks with international operations are critical development partners to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Okay? IFIs have deep institutional expertise in providing and catalyzing investments in sustainable development and have taken steps to align their activities with the 2030 Agenda, including by scaling up climate finance, designing and deploying innovative SDG-related financial instruments, and helping to crowd in public and private resources to advance global public goods in areas such as combating climate change and forced displacement. Okay, so what do IFIs do, international financial institutions? So essentially, they provide financial services, financial assistance to the countries that are affiliated with them as well. So you have your regular banks, right? And normally, you are a depositor to these banks. And for you to be able to avail their other services, like loans, salary loans, normally they provide it to their depositors, right? So for World Bank, International Monetary Fund, Asian Development Bank, member countries or depositor countries, they do have money invested or contributed to the fund of these international financial institutions, and for them to avail of the financial services that they offer. So that is somehow a requirement as well. Okay, and then these international financial institutions, they partner with the United Nations. They do have an understanding with their member nations. They are for a common goal or a common purpose, which is they do have the Sustainable Development Goals as developed by the United Nations. And the programs that they're offering to their member countries are aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. Okay, so in recent times, you've heard about the Philippine government borrowing money from these international financial institutions. Last year they borrowed money to provide sustenance to the people who lost their jobs, to provide financial assistance to them. And then recently they borrowed money to procure vaccines for the Filipino people. All right, so there are those certain situations. So the Philippine government, of course, main source of revenue is the taxes from the people, but of course that is tied with the collection. That is not let's say for 2021 January, the projected revenue for the year, that's not collected at the beginning of the year, right? That's being collected throughout the year. So sometimes for us to have money to use for the for whatever programs the government officials or our government leaders have decided to spend money on, then they would sometimes borrow from international financial institutions first, right? So that they would have the money now to spend, and then later on when we collect money from the taxes of the people, then we repay those liabilities. Okay? Probably in my separate series, Reality in Business, or Review of Government Agencies, we'll be looking at the financial report or financial statement of the whole Philippine government. Okay, so going back to international financial institutions, so normally they have their own goals and purpose, in which case they are only going to extend financial help or financial services to upon when certain conditions are met, right? Or for if the purpose of the loan is within the their goals and objectives, right? They do have only certain programs that they would like to support. So sometimes you cannot use money for things like this or that and that. So there are specific purposes on which borrowings from them could be used, right? And then of course there are terms, condition, repayment, interest, things like that as well. Okay. UNDF works with IFIs at all levels, from joint assessments, analysis, and research to project development and implementation. Oh, another. They do conduct researches, surveys, and to analyze the economic development of certain countries, normally the member countries, and then to look into the strengths and weaknesses of the individual country's financial system, and to provide advice or some sort of guidelines on where they should focus their attention on, things that they should improve for them to achieve more, or for them to be able to manage their finances well as a nation or as a country or as a government, right? Okay, so they do have a lot of programs in coordination with the United Nations. Okay, so they have a government cost-sharing financing, provides capacity development or implementation support to national government projects financed by IFI loans. Okay, in every region, UNDF is working with governments and IFIs to leverage development expertise and resources towards shared outcomes to enhance support for national governments and local communities and improve the sustainability of development efforts. Okay. So they have this. How can UNDF add value to IFI operations? So UNDF offers IFIs access, impartiality, and expertise to help maximize the true development impact of every IFI dollar spent. Okay, so they have extensive global presence, over 8,000 staff in nearly 170 countries. Operations in fragile contexts and other challenging environments. Okay. Partnerships and policy influence, excellent rapport with government and other stakeholders, knowledge and of subnational and local networks, access to resources of the wider UN development system. So what's this? Provides integrator platforms at global and country level to support multi-sectoral and multi-stakeholder approaches for SDG and implementation, Sustainable Development Goals, SDG. Credibility and reputation, carries a neutral profile bolstered by the UN flag, trusted by governments in sensitive situations. Broad development mandate, effective partner for governments in SDG planning and implementation. So I think currently they are focusing on the climate change, curbing the effects of the climate change. Recognized commitment to sustainable development, foster South-South and triangular cooperations, enabling IFIs to engage in innovative partnerships. Capacity development and implementation experience can help address national implementation gaps on underperforming loans while developing long-term capacity. Commitment to social and environmental standards, effective partner for project de-risking and piloting. High standards for project quality, accountability, and transparency. And then you have your intellectual resources, develops knowledge products and innovative financing tools, leads the UN in recovery and peace building assessments and post-disaster needs assessment. Okay. I think they allow countries to borrow money for, in case of calamities, in case of crisis, in case that there is really an immediate need. And then of course, they also lend money for infrastructure projects or immediate cash needs of these countries for their priority projects. Different countries, they have different priority projects depending on the situation of their country and of their people, right? And so if those priorities are aligned, normally they are aligned with the UN SDG, then they are easily provided or catered to by the IFIs, or international financial institutions. So they have collaborations. Okay. Most collaboration with IFIs takes place through one of several modalities. So you have your research and knowledge products, assessment and analysis, partnering through joint priorities or parallel financing, project implementation. Okay. And then you have different, okay. Let's go back to this. So essentially, UN and then the other IFIs, UN and the IFIs, they do monitor the economic state or situation of the different countries so that if they do have a need, they do check if the need is real and if these countries have the capability to turn the situation around, and if they're going to borrow money, of course they would have the means to repay them during the period that they agree on, right? And then sometimes they do help in project implementation. They do make suggestions. They partner or they allow they call this different parties to come together to work on specific projects, right? So depending on the needs of the member countries. Okay, overview of international financial institutions. So here are some of them, but again, mainly we're only concerned with the World Bank, Asian Development Bank, and IMF. In many parts of the world, international financial institutions play a major role in the social and economic development programs of nations with developing or transitional economies. This role includes advising on development projects, funding them, and assisting in their implementation. So, characterized by AAA, AAA credit ratings, and a broad membership of borrowing and donor countries, each of these institutions operates independently, the IFIs. All, however, share the following goals and objectives. Okay, as international financial or institutions catering to various countries, various nations. So in a way, they do have a common goal and objective: to reduce global poverty and improve people's living conditions and standards, to support sustainable economic, social, and institutional development, and to promote regional cooperation and integration. IFIs achieve these objectives through loans, credits, and grants to national governments. Such funding is usually tied to specific projects that focus on economic and socially sustainable development. IFIs also provide technical and advisory assistance to their borrowers. Because they do a lot of research and assessments in their member countries, they do have an understanding of their economy, how their financial system works, so they can provide advisory assistance. Okay, conduct extensive research and development issues. In addition to these public procurement opportunities, in which multilateral financing is delivered to a national government for the implementation of a project or program, IFIs are increasingly lending directly to non-sovereign guaranteed actors. Okay, some IFIs, they also provide loans to private companies, some of them, but again, majority of them, they started with, just catering to governments, national governments. Okay, working with IFIs. So normally, again, if a member country or a country is going to borrow money from IFI, so of course they also have conditions that they need to meet, and then they have to go through a process as well. So there's an application process. They have to state their reason where they're going to use the money on, and the IFI would have to make sure that these are aligned with their goals and objectives as well. In partnership with the UN, in collaboration with the UN projects, things like that. Okay, and then they have this procurement of goods and services. Sometimes the borrowings are used to procure goods and services, for building infrastructures or for buying vaccines currently, things like that. Country strategy. So different IFIs. There are IFIs that cater to most countries, but there are regional IFIs which cater only to certain countries. You have your Asian Development Bank, so mostly for Asian countries. Okay, and then again, there are other IFIs catering to other parts of the world. Okay, so depending on each country's needs, so some of the IFIs, their goals and objectives specific, would be affected as well. All right, they would have different focuses depending on the needs of the people and the particular countries. Then you have your project cycle identification. IFI in the borrowing country identify projects that are appropriate for the country's development strategy and suitable for IFI support. pre-feasibility studies are often required at this stage. Okay, although normally IFIs do have their own research and studies made. Preparation. Once a proposed project has entered the project pipeline, the borrower and IFI technical staff study and define it. Further, the actual design and preparation of the project are the borrowing country's responsibility. During this stage, the borrower and/or the IFI frequently hire consultants to help with feasibility studies, detailed project design, and the assessment of the project's environmental and social effects. So you have your appraisal, the negotiation for the terms, and then you have your implementation and supervision, and lastly, you have the evaluation, okay, final phase. Okay, all funds have been disbursed. Was it used according to the purpose? And what was the impact in reality? Okay, and then you have procurement process. Okay, if the borrowing would involve the acquisition of, let's say, fixed asset, then the IFI would sometimes act as, an intermediator, or he would connect the borrowing country with, what do you call this? A provider of the fixed asset that the borrowing country needs. Okay, so in a way, they also facilitate exchange between parties. Okay, but they do have a process that they follow. On procurement, supplier of goods, works, equipment, and non-consulting services. Okay, so they do know which country specializes in certain product or certain equipment or certain. Each country, sometimes they do provide their own specialization. So if another country has something they need, then the IFI could connect them together, right? Guidelines for procurement. You have your pre-qualification, bid evaluation or bidding methods, consultants and consulting services. Okay, so you have those guidelines again. Okay, so I think that's it for the IFI. So essentially, those are some of the things that some sort of overview about the IFIs and how they work and how they cater to the needs of their member countries. Okay. Alright, so that's it for this one. Again, this is about international financial institutions. Thanks and bye.